If you're moving to the GTA and trying to choose between Mississauga and Toronto, you're asking one of the most common questions I get. And getting it wrong could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars and make your day to day life brutal. I've seen it happen before. I've identified one specific type of buyer that prefers Mississauga every single time and one that prefers Toronto every single time. Most people only figure out which one they are after they've already bought. So make sure you watch till the end of the video, because in this video, I'm going to save you from that costly mistake. I'm Jordan Abrams, licensed Toronto real estate agent, 9 years in this market. Today, we'll go through 5 categories: home prices, commute and transit, lifestyle, schools and families, and investment potential. At the end, I'll tell you exactly which type of buyer belongs in each city. Home prices. Toronto. Toronto's average home price across the city is sitting around 1.1 million right now. For detached homes specifically, you're looking at an average closer to 1.3 million. In the downtown core and midtown, that number climbs to well over 2 million for anything decent with a yard. Condos in Toronto average around 620,000, which has come down from the peak, but the monthly carrying costs when you factor in condo fees, property tax, and your mortgage still add up fast. And there's one cost most people don't factor in until they're already mid-purchase: the double land transfer tax. In Toronto, you pay both the provincial land transfer tax and a municipal land transfer tax. On $1 million purchase, that's roughly an extra $16,000 you don't pay anywhere else in Ontario, including Mississauga. It catches people off guard every single time. For renters, a 1-bedroom in Toronto runs around $23.50 a month downtown. You can find cheaper ones in parts of North York or Scarborough, but inside the city core, you're paying for the location. Home prices. Mississauga. Mississauga comes in much cheaper, and the gap is bigger than most people realize. The average home price in Mississauga right now is sitting around $970,000. For a detached, you're looking at closer to 1.2 million, which is a real $100,000 difference from Toronto's detached average. Semi-detached homes are around 900,000, and condos are closer to 500 to 550,000, depending on how old the building is and the area. First-time buyers in Mississauga right now are finding townhomes around the $800,000 price point. Those numbers are much more accessible than Toronto at the same stage. And no double land transfer tax. What you save on closing costs alone on a Mississauga purchase can be $10,000 to $20,000 compared to the same purchase price inside Toronto. For renters, Mississauga is also slightly cheaper than Toronto's core. You're getting more square footage for the same dollar, especially near Square One or Cooksville. Housing prices winner. Mississauga. It's not particularly close when it comes to price. Before we get into the commute category, which is where this comparison gets really interesting, this is the exact conversation I have with buyers every single week. Write down my number right now and reach out to me directly. Commute and transit. Toronto. If you work in downtown Toronto, and if you live near the right area, your commute is one of the best in North America for a city this size. The Yonge subway line runs from the north end of the city all the way to Union Station. The Bloor-Danforth line crosses east to west. The Eglinton Crosstown LRT is also finally operational after over 20 years of construction, which opened Midtown and parts of Scarborough that were previously more car dependent. If you're near a subway line in Toronto, you can be at Union Station in 20 to 30 minutes, without a car, without parking, without checking a train schedule. And if you love walking, downtown Toronto is one of the most walkable places on earth. And I've traveled quite a bit. A surprisingly high number of people who work downtown just walk straight to the office every morning. In the summer, that's one of the best commutes imaginable. And in the winter, you have the path. 30 kilometers of underground tunnels, shops, restaurants, and walkways connecting over 70 buildings right in the downtown core. Over 200,000 people use it every single day. You can get to work, grab lunch, run errands, and get home without ever stepping outside in January. A note on traffic for downtown: I stopped booking client showings downtown during rush hour because it was taking me 30 minutes to travel less than a kilometer between buildings. That's Toronto traffic in a car. But on the subway, that same trip is 5 minutes. Now, the TTC has its issues, but for downtown commuters, it generally works. Commute and transit. Mississauga. Mississauga does not have a subway. The closest TTC stop is Kipling in Etobicoke, about 10 kilometers from Square One. That gap has been the city's transit weakness for decades, and it still exists in 2026. What has improved significantly is the GO train. The Lakeshore West GO line runs from Port Credit and Clarkson into Union Station in 25 to 35 minutes. That's quite fast for GTA standards. The Hazel McCallion LRT is now operational, running along Hurontario and connecting it to the city center. It doesn't go to Toronto, but it makes getting around Mississauga significantly easier than it was. And the Ontario One Fare program now lets you transfer between Mississauga buses and the TTC for free, which reduces the friction of that Kipling connection. The biggest challenge for Mississauga is if you're not near a GO station. Most of the city is not walking distance to GO Transit. You're driving to a station, parking, taking the train, then getting to your actual office. Your 30-minute train ride becomes a 75 to 90-minute door-to-door commute each way. That's a real lifestyle consideration. Transit winner, Toronto. For subway-dependent commuters and walkers especially, but Mississauga has gotten much better, especially if you live near a GO station. Lifestyle, Toronto. This is where Toronto's case is the strongest, and I say this as someone who has lived here my whole life. The summer in the city is something else. There's always something active to do outside from June through September. Beach volleyball on the waterfront, running along the lake with the skyline behind you, patios everywhere with lineups out the door on a Friday night. The energy completely shifts in the whole city when the warm weather hits. The food scene is also world-class. The diversity of this city means you can eat authentically from almost any cuisine on earth. The trade-off is everything costs more and the city demands a lot of you in return. Smaller spaces, construction on every other street, downtown parking that rivals rent in some cities, and the traffic. Toronto has the worst congestion of any city in Canada, which is a real daily reality if you're not positioned near transit. Lifestyle, Mississauga. Mississauga's lifestyle gets undersold constantly, so I want to take some time talking about that. The food scene in Mississauga is excellent if you know where to look. You can walk into a random corner plaza and find Indian, Jamaican, South Asian, Italian, Mediterranean, and Middle Eastern food all in one block. Port Credit is a really beautiful area, a vibrant waterfront village along Lake Ontario with independent shops. Streetsville on the other side of the city is a quaint, often overlooked historic village with a public square, local events, live bands, and it has real character. Celebration Square hosts festivals throughout the year and turns into an outdoor skating rink in winter. Square One is one of the largest malls in Canada with 24 million visitors a year. Pearson Airport is in Mississauga, the largest and busiest airport in Canada. Now, the limitations of Mississauga's lifestyle would be the nightlife. There are very few late night restaurants, clubs, or bars, or music venues compared to Toronto that's like 24/7. If you're in your 20s and that matters to you, Toronto wins by a mile. If you're in the family stage of life, the trade-off is almost irrelevant. Lifestyle winner. Depends entirely on your stage of life. Young professional wanting city energy, Toronto. Family wanting space, value, and more of a community, Mississauga. Quick question before the schools section. True or false? Square One in Mississauga is larger than the Eden Centre in Toronto. And while you're thinking about that, if you're trying to figure out where your budget actually gets you the most in the GTA, my number and email are on screen right now. Reach out to me directly. Schools and families. Toronto. Toronto has some of the best school catchment areas in the province. Neighborhoods like Leaside, Lawrence Park, Forest Hill, Davisville, the beaches. These are areas where strong public schools have been anchoring family buying decisions for decades and consistently rank at the top of Ontario. The challenge is what those catchment areas cost you. Getting into the right boundary in Leaside or Lawrence Park means paying a significant premium. We're talking over $2 million, $3 million for detached in specific areas. And here's something that catches families completely off guard. The boundaries in Toronto can be brutally specific. One street can be the difference between a top-ranked school and an average or below average one. Schools and families. Mississauga. Mississauga's school reputation is pretty underrated, and I say that having worked with families in both cities for 9 years. Certain neighborhoods in Mississauga, Central Erin Mills, Lorne Park, Arundel have schools that consistently rank among the best in Ontario. The thing nobody tells you about Mississauga Schools is that the value equation is quite strong. You can get into a top-tier school for hundreds of thousands of dollars less than you'd pay for the same quality of school in Toronto. The catch is that not all of Mississauga is equal on schools. Some pockets are excellent, some are average. Knowing which streets put your kids in the right schools versus the wrong ones is the kind of detail that's impossible to cover in a YouTube video. That's the conversation you have with me directly. Schools and families winner. Mississauga on value, Toronto if budget isn't a constraint and you want the full city experience wrapped around it. Toronto. Toronto has the stronger long-term investment case, and the data backs that up clearly. Supply is constrained on every side, Lake Ontario to the south, the Greenbelt to the north, and decades of existing development in every direction. Demand is driven by immigration, employment, and Toronto's status as Canada's financial and cultural capital. Toronto experienced the smallest price decline of any GTA region from the 2022 peak, just 5%, while some suburbs and further out areas saw drops of 20 to 30% or even more. Toronto, close to the core, is more insulated than almost anywhere else in Ontario, and that pattern has repeated itself every single time the market has gone through a correction. A lot of people in the city use their home as their retirement plan, and in many cases, it ends up being the best financial decision they ever make. Mississauga. Mississauga is actually fully built out at this point, with very little land left for new development. That creates a structural price floor for semi-detached and detached homes. The Lakeview Village redevelopment on the waterfront and the Hazel-McCallion LRT corridor are the two areas with the most compelling long-term investments inside Mississauga right now, in my opinion. The investment picture in Mississauga is more nuanced than Toronto, and the downside risk if you get it wrong can be brutal. A Mississauga home bought for $1.8 million in January 2022 eventually sold for $1.18 million, a $650,000 loss. That doesn't mean Mississauga is a bad investment. It means you have to be significantly more selective about where specifically you buy. Right now in 2026, we're in one of the most favorable buyer's markets I've ever seen in my entire career. Condos under $500,000, detached homes under $1 million in some pockets. If you buy the right home in the right location, right now in Mississauga, 5 years from now, you may look back on this as one of the best decisions you ever made. Investment winner. Toronto for long-term resilience and appreciation, especially close to the core. Mississauga for immediate value opportunity in specific pockets, but only if you know which ones. All right, quiz answer time. The answer is true. Square One in Mississauga is actually much larger than the Eden Centre, and it's not even close. Square One has over 2.2 million square feet of retail space with more than 360 stores. The Eden Centre, which most people assume is bigger because it's way more famous and more visited, comes in at around 1.7 million square feet. Square One is roughly 30% larger. The verdict. So Mississauga versus Toronto. Here's my actual take after 9 years working both markets. Choose Mississauga if you're a family with kids who need space and strong schools on a budget under $1.1 million. You work near a GO station or you work remotely. You want a quieter lifestyle with good access to the city when you want it. Choose Toronto if you work downtown or near a subway line and you want a predictable commute without a car. You're a young professional or a couple who wants to actually live in the city, not just commute to it. You're buying as a long-term investment and you can stomach the higher entry price. Every single neighborhood in both cities tells a different story. The numbers I gave you today are averages. The right answer for you depends on where you work, what your family needs, what your budget actually is, and what you're trying to accomplish long term. There's nothing I love more than helping people and families figure out exactly where they should be in Toronto and the GTA. My number is 416-908-6124. My email is jordanabramsrealty@gmail.com. I personally get back to everyone that reaches out. I put out new Toronto real estate content every Tuesday and Friday. And next up, I'm taking you inside 3 actual Toronto properties at 3 completely different price points to show you what your money actually buys in this market right now. Subscribe and make sure you don't miss that one. I'm Jordan Abrams. I'll see you around town.